I sold my family's land to send my daughter to New York City. I gave her everything I had so she could follow her dreams. But she paid me back by throwing away our family name and telling everyone that my life's work was just old junk she found somewhere. She used my own creations to become famous, then acted like I never existed. She thought she could just delete her own mother from her story. But I'm about to show her that mothers don't stay quiet forever. Before we start, thank you for watching and being part of this amazing community. If you believe that every mother deserves respect and recognition, you're in the right place. Please tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. It really makes my day. Now let me tell you about the biggest betrayal of my life. My name is Ruby Mae Johnson and I live in a tiny house by the ocean in South Carolina. I'm part of the Gullah people. We're a special community with our own way of life. My whole world smells like the sea and the tall grass that grows near the water. Make beautiful baskets from this grass. It's not just my job, it's who I am. The way I weave these baskets is the same way my great-great-grandmother did it. She learned it from her mother, who learned it from her mother, all the way back to Africa. Even when our people were slaves, they kept this special skill alive in their hearts. Every basket I make tells a story. Every twist of grass holds our history. My little house is filled with the sweet smell of grass and half-finished baskets everywhere. I've always been happy with my simple life. But I had big dreams for my only daughter, Maya. Maya was born with different talents than me. She couldn't sit still long enough to weave baskets. Her hands were too fast, her mind too busy. But she had magic in her eyes. She could see beauty everywhere and capture it with her camera. From the time she was just a teenager, she was always taking pictures. The old trees covered in hanging moss, the way sunlight danced on the water, the wrinkled hands of fishermen fixing their nets. She was really good at it. She could make ordinary things look like treasures. But Maya felt trapped in our small town. "Mama," she would say, her voice full of sadness, "there's a whole big world out there. There are museums and art galleries where people will see my pictures and understand them. I can't become the artist I'm meant to be if I stay here forever." The place she dreamed about most was Brooklyn, New York. She would spend hours on her computer, staring at pictures of art galleries in neighborhoods with strange names, like Williamsburg and Red Hook. She talked about the city like it was heaven on earth. She felt like our small town was a prison keeping her from her dreams. I understood why she wanted to leave, but it broke my heart. Still, what mother doesn't want her child to fly? The problem was that flying costs a lot of money, and we barely had enough to pay our bills. Maya worked at the local coffee shop, saving every dollar she could. But it wasn't nearly enough to move to New York and start over. That's when I made the most important decision of my entire life. A decision that would change everything. My family has owned a piece of land on this island for over 100 years. It's been in our family since my great-great-grandfather bought it with his first paycheck as a free man. This land isn't just dirt and trees. It's our history. It's where our ancestors are buried. It's where our family story began. There's one special spot, a beautiful hill overlooking the ocean, that has been passed down through our family with one rule: never sell it. Ever. A few days before I called the land buyer, I walked that hill with my old friend, Teacher Williams. He's 80 years old and knows every story about our community. He stopped me next to a huge old tree with branches as thick as a car. "You see this old tree, Ruby Mae," he said, touching its rough bark. "Your great-great-grandfather Samuel bought this exact spot in 1870. The story goes that he walked 20 miles with his first $15 to buy it from the white man who owned it. The man laughed at him, but Samuel just stood here all day. He wouldn't leave. Finally, the man sold it to him just to get rid of him. Samuel came and sat under this tree and cried for an hour. Not because he was sad, but because for the first time in his life, he owned something that nobody could take away. I touched the tree bark and felt like I could hear the echoes of that moment. This land wasn't just property. It was bought with tears and hope. It was sacred. The thought of selling even a piece of it felt like betraying my entire family. But what good is keeping the past if there's no future? I thought about Maya's dreams as I stared at the ocean. With a heavy heart, I made my choice. I called a man from the city who buys land to build fancy houses. His name was Mr. Davidson. He was a man who smiled too much and talked too fast. We met at the diner, and he spread out his plans on the table, covering Maya's sketches with his vision of expensive beach houses. "It's a perfect location, Ruby," he said, using my first name like we were old friends. "The ocean view is incredible. We're thinking of calling it Ocean Breeze Estates. Sounds nice, doesn't it?" He talked about my family's land like it was just empty space waiting for rich people to build on. He didn't see the tree where my great-great-grandfather cried tears of joy. He saw a place to put a swimming pool. He didn't see the smaller trees my grandmother planted by hand. He saw lawn space. I felt sick as he pointed to my land on his map. "So the whole piece?" he asked, tapping with his expensive pen. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'll sell 2 pieces, the parts with the best ocean view. But the hill with the old tree and the family graves, those are not for sale. Not ever." He shrugged like it didn't matter to him. The price he offered was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I signed the papers right there on the sticky diner table, my hand shaking so bad I could barely write my name. Signing those papers felt like cutting out a piece of my own heart. To that money, I added every dollar I'd saved for 25 years from selling my baskets to tourists at the market. I put it all in a check and gave it to Maya one night while we were eating dinner. She looked at the numbers and her eyes got huge. Then she started crying. "Mama," she whispered, "what is this? What did you do?" "I gave you wings, baby girl," I told her, trying not to cry myself. "I sold part of our land and gave you everything else I had. It's for New York. It's for your dreams." She cried and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "No, Mama, you can't do this. It's everything you have. It's too much." "It's never too much for you," I said, holding her close. She pulled back and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I will make you so proud," she promised, squeezing my hands. "I'll do a whole art show about our life, about the baskets, about our family. I'll make sure everyone knows the name Johnson. People will see my pictures and know where I came from. They'll know about you. You'll be famous, Mama. I promise." I believed every word she said. I packed her bags and put one of my most beautiful baskets inside. A special one with a pattern my grandmother taught me. It was like a piece of my soul to keep her safe and remember home. I watched her drive away to Brooklyn, my heart full of pride and sadness. I never imagined that the daughter I had given the world to would use that world to pretend I never existed. For the first few months after Maya moved to Brooklyn, we talked every single week. She was so excited about everything. "Oh, Mama, you wouldn't believe this place," she'd say, her voice full of energy. "There's art on every street corner, even in the subway tunnels. I went to an art gallery last night and stood right next to a famous artist. I feel so alive here." She was struggling to pay rent, she said, but it was good struggling, the kind that makes you stronger. She rented a tiny studio in an old building and was taking pictures for her first art show. I would send her packages with homemade cookies and small baskets to make her new place feel like home. My heart was so full of pride. My sacrifice was working. But slowly things started to change. The weekly calls became every other week. The long conversations became short, rushed chats. Maya's voice began to sound different too. The soft, warm way she used to talk was being replaced by a sharp, fast way of speaking that sounded like a stranger. One day I called her and heard cars and sirens in the background. "Hey, Mama, can't talk long. I'm meeting with a gallery owner," she said quickly. "I was just thinking about you, baby," I said. "I made a new basket with that pattern you always loved." "That's nice, Mama. Really nice," she said, but she sounded distracted. "Listen, things are getting really intense here. It's all about conceptual frameworks and cultural authenticity right now. It's very complicated. You wouldn't really understand. It's a city thing. Conceptual frameworks. Cultural authenticity. These words felt like rocks in my stomach. She was right. I didn't understand. She was busy, she said. Always networking, meeting important people, getting ready for her first big show. I told myself this was normal. This was the price of chasing dreams. It was Teacher Williams who first showed me what was really happening in Maya's world. He's always been like a grandfather to our whole community. He knew how much I missed Maya, so one day he came over with his new tablet computer. "Ruby May," he said with a smile. "The whole world is in this little screen. Let's go find your girl." He showed me how to use the internet and typed Maya's name into the search. There she was, a website, blog, and Instagram page. It was like looking at a complete stranger. The pictures were beautiful. They showed our world in a way I'd never seen before. The old wooden church, the nets hanging to dry, a single blade of grass against the blue sky. But the words underneath made my blood run cold. Teacher Williams read one out loud. Maya writes, "I document the artifacts of a disappearing rural culture, exploring the unnamed beauty of primitive craftsmanship." He looked at me over his glasses. Disappearing. Primitive. Name is talking about U.S. Ruby May. She wrote like she was a scientist who had discovered some lost tribe, not a daughter writing about her own home. She wrote about the simple beauty of the things she photographed. She never mentioned our community by name. She never mentioned the Gullah people. She never mentioned me. The first really big shock came when I saw the announcement for her first solo art show. It was huge. The moment we'd both been dreaming about. I felt so proud I started crying. But when I read the announcement, my heart stopped. The show was called Voices from the Forgotten, and underneath it said, "A solo exhibition by Maya Sterling." Sterling, not Johnson. She had thrown away our family name, the name of her father, her grandfather, all the proud, hard-working Johnsons who had built a life on this island. She replaced it with something that sounded like it came from a movie. I called her that night, my hands shaking. "Baby, I saw the announcement," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm so proud of you." Sterling. What happened to Johnson? There was a long, uncomfortable silence. "Oh, that," she said finally, her voice light and dismissive. "It's just a professional name, Mama. Stage name. Johnson is so common. It doesn't stand out in the art world. And honestly, it's a slave name. I wanted something I chose myself, something that represents my art. Sterling has a nice ring to it, don't you think? It's more memorable. It's about branding. Branding. Our family name, the name Samuel had carried into freedom, was just bad branding that needed to be updated. The pain was so sharp I couldn't breathe. She had taken our difficult, complicated history and turned it into a marketing problem. But again I made excuses. She's young. She's trying to succeed in a tough world. It's not about me. Just business. I congratulated her and hung up, my whole body shaking. I wanted to go to New York and see her big moment with my own eyes. But when I mentioned it, she shut me down fast. "Oh, Mama, you don't want to do that," she said quickly. "It's going to be crazy. So crowded, so many art world people. You'd be uncomfortable, and plane tickets are so expensive. You should save your money. I'll send you pictures of everything." She was building a wall between her world and mine, one excuse at a time. And for the first time I realized she was building it to keep me out. After that conversation, the calls stopped completely. My care packages went unanswered. I was left to watch my daughter's life through a computer screen, a silent observer of the dream I had paid for. A dream where my own name wasn't good enough. The art show was a huge success. Even from far away I could feel the impact. Teacher Williams would bring me news he found online. "Ruby May, your girl is in the newspaper," he'd say, showing me articles on his tablet. The reviews were amazing. Critics praised Maya Sterling for her fresh, authentic vision and her hauntingly beautiful photographs. They called her a rising star in the art world. Every word of praise was a strange mix of pride and pain. They were praising my daughter, but they were praising a stranger, a fiction built on my sacrifice. The final, heart-crushing blow came in my mailbox about a month later. It was a thick, shiny art magazine. Teacher Williams had ordered it for me, thinking it would make me happy. On the cover was one of Maya's photographs, a close-up of an old fishing net against weathered wood. Inside was a long article about her. The title was The Chronicler of the Forgotten. I sat in my favorite chair on the porch, my hands shaking as I read. The article was full of quotes from my daughter. She talked about her art, about finding beauty in forgotten places and disappearing ways of life. I grew up in an isolated rural community in the Deep South, she said. It's a place where time stopped. There's a raw, unschooled beauty to the objects people make there. They're not trained artists. They're just creating out of necessity. My work is about capturing that unconscious beauty before it vanishes forever. Isolated, unschooled, unconscious. She made our home sound like a museum of primitive people who didn't know they were making art. She never mentioned the Gullah people. She never mentioned our rich, living culture that had survived and thrived through sheer determination. She talked about her past like she was an explorer who had discovered the ruins of a dead civilization, not a daughter who had walked away from her own vibrant heritage. A cold fear settled in my stomach. I turned the page and my world collapsed. It was a full-page photograph of Maya in her spotless white Brooklyn studio. She looked stunning, in an expensive black outfit, her hair cut in a sharp modern style I didn't recognize. She looked confident, successful, and completely unfamiliar. But it wasn't her that took my breath away. It was what was on the wall behind her. Displayed like a holy relic, lit up with special lights, was my basket. The special basket I had given her for good luck when she left home. It was one of my most complex and beautiful creations. A masterpiece of the art my grandmother had taught me, with the intricate diamond pattern that was our family's signature. It was a piece of my soul, a living link between generations of Johnson women. And underneath the photograph in small, elegant letters were the words that destroyed my world. Artist Maya Sterling, with a piece of vintage folk art from her collection, which serves as primary inspiration for her work. Vintage folk art. From her collection. The words hit me like physical blows. Vintage, like it was some old thing from a thrift store. Folk art, like it was just a quaint craft with no real meaning. From her collection. Like she had bought it from a stranger instead of receiving it as a gift of love from her mother. She hadn't just erased our name. She had erased our existence. My grandmother, whose hands had taught me the pattern, was erased. The generations of women whose skill and spirit were woven into that basket were erased. Her own mother was erased. She had taken our sacred living tradition and turned it into a decorative object without history, without meaning, without a maker. I stared at the page until my vision blurred with tears. The magazine slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. Maya stared up at me from the page. A successful stranger in her white-walled world. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't about business. This was a deliberate, calculated act of theft. She had stolen my art, my history, my identity, and she was selling it to the world as her own brilliant discovery. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for hadn't just left me behind. She had swallowed me whole, digested my story, and spit out a clean, sellable version that the world would never question. The silence from her wasn't mysterious anymore. It was necessary. How could she talk to the mother she was pretending never existed? For a whole day, I was paralyzed by grief so deep it felt like a physical sickness. The magazine lay on my floor like an open wound in my small living room. I couldn't bring myself to pick it up, but I couldn't look away either. The image of my daughter standing proudly in front of my work, my legacy, which she had labeled as anonymous, was burned into my brain. The pain was deeper than just a mother's heartbreak. It was the pain of being erased from my own life story. But I am a daughter of the Sea Islands. Our people have survived much worse than a broken heart. We have survived the unthinkable. Strength runs through our blood like the tides run through the marsh. By the second day, the grief began to harden into cold, righteous anger. This wasn't just an insult to me, Ruby Mae Johnson. This was an insult to my mother and her mother and all the women whose hands had taught mine. My daughter hadn't just stolen from me. She had stolen from them. I picked up the magazine with steady hands now. I wrapped it carefully in cloth like it was evidence, which I realized it was. I walked down the sandy path to Teacher Williams' house. He was sitting on his porch reading as he always did. He saw me coming and smiled, but the smile faded when he saw the look in my eyes. "Ruby Mae," he said with concern, standing up. "What's wrong? What happened?" He didn't speak. I just unwrapped the magazine and opened it to the photograph. I put it on the table between us. He put on his reading glasses and looked at the page. I watched his face change from curiosity to confusion to deep, thunderous anger. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with the same fury I felt. "Folk art," he said, his voice a dangerous whisper. "She called your work folk art. From her collection." He wasn't just sad for me. He was personally insulted. As our community's keeper of stories, he understood the true crime she had committed. "This is not a family fight, Ruby Mae," he said, his voice rising with passion. "This is cultural theft. That basket," he said, pointing at the photograph, "is not anonymous folk art. That is a Johnson family weave. I can trace that diamond pattern back to your great-grandmother Rose. This is not craft. This is a masterpiece of a specific, traceable artistic tradition. She is selling a lie. She is selling our history and calling it her own." His words set fire to my anger. He gave my personal pain a name and context. He made my rage feel justified. "You cannot let this stand," he insisted. "This is bigger than you and her. If she can do this, if she can erase her own mother, then the whole world will keep believing our art is just quaint, nameless craft with no masters, no history. We must fight this." That afternoon he called a meeting. He gathered the elders of our community at the old church. I sat on a wooden bench as they arrived one by one. Mr. Samuel, a fisherman with hands weathered by decades of work. Sister Rose, whose voice carried the weight of 100 old songs. And others. I told them my story with Teacher Williams' help. I showed them the magazine. A wave of collective anger filled the sacred space. They passed the magazine from hand to hand, their faces grim. They saw Maya's actions not as a daughter's betrayal, but as an attack on all of us. Mr. Samuel was the first to speak, his voice like rolling thunder. "I remember that girl," he said, shaking his head. "She spent a whole summer on my boat, taking pictures. Said she wanted to show the dignity of our work. Took pictures of my nets, the ones my daddy taught me to mend. She promised she'd make this old fisherman famous. I guess I became nameless too." Sister Rose, her eyes filled with deep sadness, spoke next. She came to our church services, recording our hymns, the old ones passed down through generations. She said she wanted to preserve them. She recorded my grandmother's songs, songs brought over from Africa. Now I wonder what fancy gallery they're playing. In what found sound she calls them. Their stories painted a devastating picture. Maya hadn't just stolen from me. She had mined our entire community for content, taking our stories, our songs, our faces, and stripping away our names and history to build her own career. It was Teacher Williams who knew what to do next. "There's a lawyer in Charleston," he said firmly. "Ms. Angela Brooks. Her firm specializes in cultural heritage and protecting communities like ours. She's helped Gullah families before, fighting to protect our land and traditions. She'll understand this isn't just a family court case. This is about protecting a culture from being stolen." He wrote down her name and number and pressed it into my hand. The fear I had felt before was gone, replaced by the strength of my community. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had the power of my ancestors and the support of my people behind me. The next morning I made the call. I was no longer just a heartbroken mother looking for sympathy. I was a representative of a living tradition seeking justice. The drive to Charleston felt different this time. Usually, trips to the city were for selling my baskets at the market. Simple business trips. This time it was a mission of war. Ms. Angela Brooks' office was in a beautiful old building in the historic district. She was a sharp, energetic woman with warm eyes and fierce intelligence. She listened to my story patiently, looking through the magazine and photographs of my other baskets that I had brought. She had Mr. Samuel's and Sister Rose's stories too, which I had carefully written down. She saw the legal angle immediately, just as Teacher Williams had predicted. "The personal betrayal is heartbreaking, Mrs. Johnson," she said, her voice filled with genuine sympathy. "But the professional theft is legally actionable. What your daughter has done isn't just wrong, it's illegal. She has built her career and is profiting from your unique, identifiable, and uncredited artistic work. We can fight this." Her strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. The first step was to build legal protection around my art. Ms. Brooks explained that while basket weaving is a shared cultural heritage, individual artists' unique patterns and techniques can be protected by copyright law, just like a painter's signature style. For 3 weeks we worked together. I brought in dozens of my baskets, including some made by my mother and grandmother. A professional photographer documented each one. We focused on the unique characteristics of the Johnson family weave. The specific way I finished edges with a triple twist binding, the diamond pattern Mr. Williams had identified, the intricate star designs that were my signature. "This is the key," Ms. Brooks explained, pointing to the photographs. "This is not anonymous folk art. This is a demonstrable, consistent, and unique artistic signature. We are going to officially register it." She filed copyright applications, creating a legal paper trail that officially established me, Ruby Mae Johnson, as the artist and owner of this specific body of work. It was powerful and profound. For the first time, my art wasn't just family tradition. It was legally recognized intellectual property. With the copyrights pending, we prepared our weapon. It was a cease and desist letter written with surgical precision. It wasn't a plea for recognition. It was a legal demand. Ms. Brooks insisted the letter be sent not just to Maya Sterling, but to the gallery owner as well. "The gallery is profiting from this lie," she explained. "They have legal and ethical responsibility to correct the record. They are complices. We will put them in a position where they have more to lose by protecting your daughter than by exposing her." The letter was a masterpiece of cold legal fury. It laid out the facts in stark, undeniable terms. It cited the newly filed copyrights for the Johnson weave. It detailed Mr. Samuel's and Sister Rose's testimony, establishing a pattern of cultural theft. Demanded 2 things. First, a full public correction. The gallery and Maya Sterling were required to immediately update the caption in the magazine's online edition, on the gallery website, and on all promotional materials. The new caption had to give full artistic credit to master weaver Ruby Mae Johnson for the heirloom basket, and acknowledge her as the primary artistic influence and teacher. Second, the letter demanded that Maya stop exhibiting or selling photographs featuring my designs without entering into a formal licensing agreement with me. This agreement would require her to pay me a significant percentage of any profits from images of my work. It was, as Ms. Brooks put it, a bill for her inspiration. The letter was sent by courier to the gallery and to Maya's Brooklyn studio. As Ms. Brooks sealed the envelopes, she looked at me and smiled. "They thought you were anonymous folk art, Mrs. Johnson," she said. "They're about to find out you're an artist with a very good lawyer." I drove home that evening feeling more powerful than I ever had in my life. The quiet, invisible woman whose hands had worked in shadows was about to step into the light. I had spent my life weaving baskets to hold other people's stories. Now I had finally woven something strong enough to hold my own. The cease and desist letter hit the trendy Brooklyn art world like a hurricane. The first response came not from my daughter, but from the gallery owner. He called Ms. Brooks in complete panic. He was terrified. The last thing a gallery trying to build a reputation for cutting-edge authenticity wanted was a public scandal about cultural theft and exploitation of an elderly black artist from the South. Words like lawsuit, copyright infringement, and fraudulent representation were death sentences for his business and reputation. He put immediate, intense pressure on Maya. Her entire artistic brand, the carefully constructed story of the genius who had discovered this raw, authentic aesthetic, was built on a lie, and the gallery owner knew it. If the truth came out, she would be finished. Her career would be over before it really began. The call from Maya finally came a week later. It wasn't the call of a sorry daughter. It was the call of a cornered, desperate animal. "How could you do this to me?" she hissed into the phone, her polished sterling accent cracking under stress, showing the sharp edges of panic underneath. "After everything I've worked for, how could you try to destroy me?" I was ready for her. I sat calmly in my chair on the porch, the phone loose in my hand, the familiar smell of the salt air keeping me steady. I felt strangely detached and peaceful. "I didn't do this to you, Maya," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself when you decided to steal my work and erase my name. It was a misunderstanding. It was artistic interpretation," she stammered, throwing out fancy words that had served her well in her new world. "You don't understand the art world, Mama. It's not that simple." "There's no misunderstanding the word collection, Maya," I replied. "There's no artistic interpretation of calling something vintage. When you got it from your mother, you lied. And now you will tell the truth. You're just jealous," she suddenly screamed, her voice turning ugly. "You're jealous of my success. You wanted me to stay stuck there with you making baskets for tourists forever. You can't stand that I made something of myself." The accusation was so cruel, so far from the reality of the land I had sold and the life savings I had given her, that it didn't even hurt. It simply confirmed that the daughter I knew was gone. "I will not discuss this further with you," I said calmly. "You can talk about the licensing agreement and the public correction with Ms. Brooks. The conversation between you and me is over." Hung up the phone. The public correction was my victory. It wasn't a quiet, private apology. It was a formal, humiliating, and legally required act of truth-telling. The gallery updated its website immediately. The online version of the magazine article was changed with a long editor's note explaining the error, and Maya, under legal pressure, was forced to issue a formal public statement on her website and social media. The statement was a masterpiece of forced humility. Acknowledged that the vintage folk art was actually a masterpiece woven by her mother, celebrated master weaver Ruby Mae Johnson. It acknowledged that her entire artistic vision was deeply influenced by the Gullah traditions she had been raised in. She was forced, word by painful word, to put back the history she had tried so hard to erase. She had to name me. She had to name us. A few weeks later, Teacher Williams came over with his tablet and a big smile. "Ruby, you have to see this," he said. He showed me a blog post from a major Brooklyn art critic. The title was The Sterling Scandal: When Authenticity Becomes Appropriation. He read part of it out loud. The art world was shaken this week by revelations that rising star Maya Sterling built her entire narrative on the uncredited work of her own mother, Gullah master weaver Ruby Mae Johnson. The gallery has cut ties, and the scandal raises important questions about who gets to tell whose story, and more importantly, who profits from it. It seems the chronicler of the forgotten